Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer, and today I have a new guest who has not graced our channel ever before, but you're going to listen to a fascinating man, a political activist in the Bay Area who has been active for about 30 plus years, and he is an amazing source of information as a Bay Area now starts to prepare for the San Francisco city, perhaps doing its own version of the caste discrimination bill. Now you're seeing how a certain successful template or toolkit plays itself over and over. So let's welcome Yogi Chugh. Yogi, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar, Sri. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Yogi, you and I, we've been great friends lately. You've opened my eyes to many new talent coming up the ranks, whether it is a Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and we've had some great discussions thus far. I want our viewers to know a little bit about you first, and then we can talk about the need for Indian Americans to be part of the United States politics. Take it away, sir.
Great, Sri. Thank you very much. I came to the United States about 37 years ago. And during that time, straddling between, the relationships with the first generation of Indian Americans that have been in this country, and then figuring out my own sense of political engagement. I was always involved in understanding the impact of politics when I was growing up in India at Delhi University in college. And as I came into the United States and began my term at my university, began to recognize that having a political voice is very, very important. And what does a political voice mean? It means being in tune to the circumstances, being in tune to the challenges you face as a society, and then really being able to understand that how do you carve out your own role in that activism. 1986, I still remember vividly when first coming into this country, a professor in my class told me and said, Mr. Chugh, you seem to be fascinated by the world of politics. What brings about this influence? Being a part of a family in India that was involved in many gamuts of government, working for the bureaucracy as well, at that time, began to understand the special role that India was emerging as a new democracy. And from that point, I began to recognize that people's perception of India was based upon what they read in the newspapers or the TV channels or Discovery Channel at that moment in time. Having to defend myself from my practices, my faith, questions asked about, the dot on your woman's forehead, and really being able to educate people. And finding out that most of the perceptions of the Indian American community at that moment in time were based upon perceptions, right or wrong. We live by them. And began that effort of really understanding that, how do we come back and educate our community? How do we educate ourselves locally? And then really begin to understand that everything is politics in America. And I know that context might create a tremendous amount of criticism, or there might be people who will ally with me on that and say, Yogi, you're right. But began that effort of recognizing that if we do not educate our local communities about the issues that are important to us, living in America as we carved out our own immigrant journeys, that somebody else will define it for us. And Sri, that has been the genesis of my political engagement, define who I am, whether it's locally, in my community, serving on local commissions, rising through the ranks, becoming a part of my local Democratic Party, becoming a part of the national organizations of the Indian American community at that moment, the FIAs, the Indian American Forum for Political Education, really began to recognize that if you don't carve out your own political identity, somebody will carve it for you. And hence why I've made it, a part of my perspective in life to really engage on all things politics.
Yogi, I still remember the one conversation I had with Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, who said that if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. Right now, the Indian Americans find themselves being on the menu as far as the caste discrimination bill is concerned. I know I'm putting you on the spot. Here is somebody who, perhaps has democratic leanings. They want to bring about this legislation. What do you think? Is it right to be defined the way it is being done in the Seattle Council resolution?
I think that the very idea of the fact that as the Indian American community continues to rise from being a a model minority now to a key critical player in the Indo-US relationship. And I mentioned the Indo-US relationship because I talked about the fact that we're identified by perceptions, and the reality of people in a free country as America, where dissent is allowed and people can advocate for whatever position they want. I think the very idea is that there will be conversations about India and the United States and the old country politics that often we permeate. I'll give you an example myself, Sri. I've lived in this country for 37 years. I've been a key, a component of this society, both locally, nationally, and internationally in that regard, from the context of the U.S. Relationship that I personally take a tremendous amount of interest in. But here's the conversation piece that comes along. Every democracy has imperfections. Look at the United States. We have our own sets of challenges we've struggled through in the last 5 years that has really begun to define who we are as a nation. America's had to look in the mirror and come back and assess where we are, and there's agreement or disagreement, and that's the purest form of democracy. When people ask me the question about India, I come back and say, well, you know what? India is a 75-year-old democracy. It's got its own set of imperfections that the people of India, the 1.6 billion people, and I lose the number because obviously the numbers are going up, but the vibrancy of India will take care of these issues. I've had the distinct privilege of having had the chance to meet so many leaders from India who've come into the United States, both bureaucrats, elected officials, heads of state as well. But I look at the fact that today India is at the cusp of enhancing itself on becoming not only a geopolitical player, but a geoeconomic player as well. The imperfections of India are certainly something that the colonial British have left and is taking a generation to work its way through. To your point, when questions are put before us as an Indian American community, I personally abhor the idea of litmus tests. It is un-American to have a litmus test put before you. And I see what is happening is that these opportunities of bringing these conversations to the table are reality of what's happening. I will not be naive enough to say that does caste in some form or shape exist in India. And certainly I'm impressed by this generation of people in the nation who are continuing to thrive in a world where people are talking about the fact that everybody must move forward. Just like in America, Bernie Sanders said nobody should be left behind. I believe that is the premise of the new India as well, that let India rise, and in the process, let's uplift everybody. When I look at the leaders of our country, I look at the president of our country, I look back and say, it is something that has made tremendous strides. Now, fast forward into America. Does the conversation about something exist? Are there people in America who believe that this question needs to be front and forefront? I would rather come back and flip the dialogue to come back and say, well, let's talk about religious phobia. Let's talk about discrimination. Let's talk about human rights in the context of the entire world, and enable us to come back and define how we as Indian Americans living in this country can help America make the greatest nation in the world. And then to the point about political activism, I've talked about perception, Sri.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I thought you're done. Go ahead.
Let the perceptions of us be defined by the New World Order, in which I believe India and the United States will be seen as the most consequential partnership of the 21st century. Through that, fringe elements will continue to bring their dissent. There will be people who will stand to that dissent, but somewhere along, I believe that the Indian American story is a very compelling story, and one we should talk about the merits of meritocracy and our contributions to this nation, more so than anything else.
You defined the question excellently when you first started out, saying that if you don't define yourself, somebody is going to define you for you. And I think that really is the crux of this issue that Indian Americans are now facing. And thanks for pointing that out. And thanks for not shying away from this rather difficult question, Yogi. Now, I want to ask you a little bit about your own personal ambitions. Are you planning to run for office?
No, Sri. I believe that, there are people who can run for office. And I ran for office for city council. And I certainly came back to run my campaign as to become a campaign of ideas. I've always been firmly actually in the belief that government has finally become a meritocracy that is attracting our best and our brightest. And what we have to do is we have to elevate the level of dialogue in our communities to really help bring forward the very issues that are important. Now, will I run for office again? The answer is a never say no. Under the right set of circumstances, we could. But I'm more fascinated today, Sri, more than ever, recognizing that the Indian American community, 4 million strong and growing, is going to become such a critical part of the American lexicon, whether it's corporate America, whether it's medicine, whether it's academia, whether it's small businesses. We continue to be at the forefront. And that opportunity is unprecedented. So where do I want to spend most of my time on? I really want to really focus on this US-India partnership, because I think it's a defining moment in history. Where can a community living in a foreign country come back, living in America, our home now, continue to make an impact in the world, and specifically with India as a partner for one of the most thriving democracies in the world, which we call America today. So no, not office, but helping other people get elected, becoming a part of the national discourse, and advocating.
You segued me to the next question almost instinctively. That was what I was going to ask. Viewers, I apologize for the technical glitches that is happening on this video, but Chugh's voice is coming through fine. So please, bear with us. It took us a few minutes to try and figure out the best bandwidth, but somehow we are still, in the process of figuring this out. So may I request all of you to like this video? Yogi's voice needs to be heard far and wide, because the next segment that I'm going to talk about is going to really, really open your eyes, you, the viewer, and just stay tuned. And please share this video if you can to all your friends and family, because very important point of this discussion is coming up right now. Yogi, you've had a chance or an opportunity to try and shape some of the opinions of the new upcoming Indian American leadership in the United States. And I'm going to drill down to a few individuals who you've helped try and shape their political ideology. One of them is Congressman Khanna. And how much of Ro did you see before? Because now Ro is a very changed person. Right around the 2022, midterm polls, we saw a totally different version of Ro. And how much of that shaping, of positioning him more as a moderate who can get things done, who has authored so many bills. A lot of people don't know the hard work that Congressman Khanna has put in, myself included, until you opened my eyes to it. So talk us through a little bit about when you knew Congressman Khanna and how things are up until now.
Well, I've known Ro for quite a long time now, 14, 15 years, right off the time when he came off of his Tamil Nadu run. I think Ro has matured in his thinking, but what seems grounded in his belief is, certainly as you know, his grandfather was a freedom fighter, and he's been deeply impacted by a sense of personal value, knowing that public service can do good to humanity. And as a part of that, he's been a champion of, I would say, the singular force that has defined his thinking has probably been Mahatma Gandhi. He quotes about it extensively. I think Ro takes his job as a member of Congress for the United States very, very seriously. And, he's a little bit of a maverick in that regard. He's been able to etch his identity as a Democrat, but purely grounded in the fact that he is grounded in some progressive values, which I think enables him to look at the US-India partnership in an amazingly intense way. He's critical of his own administration, and he's critical of anybody who he thinks needs to be, when he needs to articulate a viewpoint, he does it tactfully. I think he has straddled himself in a way in American politics today where he recognizes that in order to be effective, you have to have compromise. And along that, he's able to forge coalitions. I think he is also somebody who believes in the infinite potential of the US-India partnership and the role that India will play in that role, both from putting a counter check on a strong and growing influence of China, at the same time the geoeconomic plight, and understands that as America reinvents itself in the New World Order, as you mentioned, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and now he's focusing on really transforming how the government focus on creating a technology footprint and a supply chain consideration that enables America to regain its manufacturing strength in the world. I think he's astute. I think he also understands the vital role that India is going to be playing in that. So I think that over the years he's evolved. I think he's made his fair share of statements that he has had to make to Indian Americans living in this country. And I think as a part of that, I think the next decade will be an opportunity for him to come back and understand how do we continue to build this people-to-people relationship. And he's evolved. He recognizes, in my judgment, that there are times when things may have been said when it may not have been the right context in which they were said. His intentions may have been good, but how he said that is probably misconstrued. And that's where I think he's made an effort now to come make amends and really forge his moderate viewpoint, his worldview, and then on the US policy side, legislation that will enable America to be one of the greatest nations in the world.
Well, you say compromise, I say inclusivity, and I think it's the same thing. If you want to be successful at politics, you have to become more inclusive, more acceptable to the various viewpoints of the society. And viewers, before you start saying, "Oh, look, Shri has gone woke; he's become a Democrat now." No, I'm independent. I do appreciate merit. Now, I'll give you a simple example where I really appreciated what Khanna did. Remember that controversy about deplatforming Donald Trump from Twitter? Do you know who actually said that, Vijaya, you are making a big mistake? It was Khanna. He was a Democrat. He stood to benefit because the political winds were blowing towards the Democrats. But he said, no, the way you are going about doing this is not right. In fact, he is the one who has authored the CATSA sanction waiver for India in its S-400 purchase also. So Roe has really come to that point where he sees what's good for the country. And I think that's kind of coming ahead of what he is looking at for what's good for me or what's good for my party. And I appreciate that. Your views, Yogi, because this is not something that has been easy. It's not easy for a politician to suddenly say, well, this is how he's essentially, changed direction a little bit, if you will.
Well, he has, but I think the bigger context is to look at what Roe stands for. Roe, Congressman Khanna, I think firmly believes in certain things. As I mentioned, he's grounded by a Gandhian belief. But one of the things that I often tell everybody else is, Congressman Khanna is a member of the United States Congress. Anything and everything that he does first has to be seen in the context of what's best for America. Through the example of CATSA, I think it was historic in the nature that at a moment in time when India was at the cusp of making a decision on where its position is going to remain versus the Russia-Ukraine war. In spite of all of that, he was able to work along with many others, both in Congress and the administration, as well as probably, to my point, business interests as well in the United States, where he literally was able to forge a coalition of 300 people who came back and said that CATSA should be given an exemption for India, and that's really the historic nature. Pass or fail, that's not important. The fact that people of all stripes, Republicans and Democrats, came along is probably, I would say, the sense of what Roe's beliefs are vis-a-vis the relationship of the India-US partnership. And as you know, he's now the chair of the India caucus. There's going to be more of an opportunity for him to come back and look at the prism of American politics through the Indo-US relationships. So I think Roe is evolving in his role as a statesman. I think Roe is evolving in the context of how you legislate as a country. And as you uplift America, how do you find allies in the world? And I think he's said this statement many, many times, that America's journey in the future ahead is going to clearly be etched with a partnership with India, who, for obvious reasons, both on economic and the geopolitical considerations, is forging its own role on the world stage as a formidable player.
Yogi, thank you so much for taking time out so early in the morning to sit with me and talk about this. And again, viewers, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Next time we'll have a sit-down interview, my friend. I have all the equipment. I can come down to your office, or you can meet me. I have rental premises in your city. and we'll do this thing in a more sit down, relaxed way. And in the meantime, if you do decide to run for political office, I wish you all the best. And again, it was a pleasure talking to Yogi. It's been a while since we connected. But viewers, do like, share, and subscribe to our channel and listen to what Yogi has to say. For some time, Yogi, I have to tell you this, the last thought from my side. I was a little concerned about where is the youth leadership of both parties going. And the last few weeks, sort of, suddenly 2024 has come alive. Very young people are trying to run for office, and I think US has a great future. We just have to sit back and appreciate and nurture the right talent. And I think you're doing a splendid job. Good luck to you. More power to you. And viewers, please, again, listen to Yogi, and I'm going to be back again with him. We're going to discuss a few more things about how America is headed. We're just in the beginning of the presidential run cycle. Still 18 months to go. A lot of water that needs to flow down the whichever river you want, Potomac if you want. So thank you once again, Yogi. Namaskar.
Namaskar, Shri. Thank you.